Hey everybody, welcome to another Paint with Me tutorial. Today I am going to be painting a couple pansies as requested by Lorraine, and I thank her for the request. I would love to do paint with me's of anything you guys want. So yeah, I've attached the reference photos so you can paint along, but first I'm just sketching out the one pansy. I am wetting down just one petal. I chose the bottom petal and I'm just wetting it ever so lightly so that whenever I add a touch of the yellow, it kind of spreads by itself and it just kind of does a little gradient. So after that, I'm trying to get the right purplish blue, and it's still wet on the paper, so I'm just kind of touching it on to let it just spread and do its own thing. It really has a wonderful effect when you do that. So now I'm going to do the other two side petals. So I wet it down first, and now I'm doing the same type of thing. I just want to start on the edges because it's like a gradient from the outside edge. That's where the darkest part is, and gets almost white towards the middle. So I'm going to do a couple layers of this just to get the right effect. And make sure it's dry in between each petal. You want it to be completely dry because the petals are touching and you don't want them to run together. So as you can see here, I turned the sketchbook upside down. That's just because I paint better in certain angles, I guess. So I just switch it around to whatever's the most comfortable. So now this little petal is kind of tucked behind and darker, more of a reddish purple. So I went ahead and mixed the right color for that and did that one. And I'm going to let that dry, which I cut that out because there's no point in having it on here. But I let that completely dry. And now I'm doing the very last petal. It has that same more reddish purple. And it's darker, where the other petals meet because it's kind of like shadowy. So, I kind of dab some darker color in there and let it spread around on its own. Okay, I let that dry completely. And I'm going to add some more yellow and just a touch of green in the middle. So now I'm going to do another layer on these other petals because it has more color in it. Well, it needs more color in it. So once again, I'm wetting it down before I put in the color because I want it to spread and like blend into the white seamlessly. So just wet it down, clear water. Always make sure your brush is very clean. And wetting the edges, adding some more color. Just trying to mimic what I see. And as you can see, now it's dry. I've just let it dry before I go on to the next part. So now I'm doing the little tiny stroke marks that are on the inside. And those are cleaner strokes, so you don't want to do that on wet. Like the other ones I wanted to be nice and blendy, but these ones are very sharp, so that's going to be on dry. So I got the color I needed and just with a very tiny brush, did these little teeny strokes. I'm just adding a little bit more shading and definition. Okay, so that one's pretty much done. So I'm going on to the next pansy. Drew it on first, and now I'm wetting down I'm gonna choose the one that's towards the background the most, that petal to work with first. So I'm just wetting down that specific petal, adding the pink. And if at once you put the color down and it's just not as vibrant as you want, don't be afraid to add more. I've one of the things I've realized with paintings is if you're not satisfied with the way it looks, it's most likely because you haven't added enough contrast or shading. So just keep working. The only reason you don't like it is because it's not finished. Just contrast is very, very important. So I've gone on to the next petal. It's not the one right beside it because I didn't want it to bleed into the other one. So I skipped a petal and went to the next one. And this one has some purple in the middle with little streakies. So I wet the paper just a little bit. It's not too damp, but it's not completely dry either. It's hard to explain. It's just the way you have to get to know your paints to get the right feel, like the balance of water. On to the next petal, filling in a little pink. Adding just some more color towards the middle. And now I'm adding the purple towards the center. Letting the water blend it for you, really. And I'm drying it with a heat gun. Now on to the last petal. And that one has the little yellow middle, so I'm adding that. Make sure it's dry before I go into the next section. Decided to do this other petal first. The other solid pink one. Adding a little bit more, like some darker tones where it's kind of tucked under the other flower. And onto the last petal. I'm wetting it down completely first. Now adding some color. Just dabbing it in lightly. Adding the little purple ring. Now this one, I wanted it to blend towards the pink side, so that part is damp. But towards the yellow side, I did not want it to blend, so that I didn't wet the middle. So that's more of like more of a sharp line. Now I'm just adding a little bit of green in the middle and some shading so it looks like, it looks like the flower actually has that deep middle part. I'm just adding some more definition here and there. And I realized I needed that middle part there to be even darker. So I added some purple, but I added a touch of red because I wanted it. It needed to be deep, 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 deep. So for the back, I decided it needed some background. And I was just going to actually put on some individual petals, but then I thought, nah, I don't want it to take away from the flowers. So I'm just going to make like some vague greenery in the back. So I'm just mixing up a couple greens and just carefully putting it around close to the flowers. And I accidentally started in a way I don't normally like. I like to wet it first, like I normally do, because I want it to blend. So as you can see now, I'm doing it right. Just putting on some clear water first, and then you dab on the dark pigments and just kind of let it fluff out on its own. It gives it such a nice effect. Then the edges are softer that way. But you got to be very careful not to make it wet or overlap the actual flower. Now I'm drying it with my heat gun. You could use a hair dryer, of course. I just prefer heat gun because it doesn't put out a lot of air. Okay, so here I'm covering up the flowers because I wanted to do some spattering, but I didn't want it to get on the flower. Dry the spatters because I know I would totally smear them if I didn't. And just adding some more definition, more contrast around the edges. I have a white Posca pen here. It's basically an acrylic fine tip marker, so I want to add some highlights because around the edge of each petal, it really has this kind of like a white line. So I'm adding that very delicately in just to help it pop a little bit. And that's really about it. After I'm done, I usually just go in with maybe some pencils and markers, and just add some more contrast and definition. It's really up to you, just to get a feel for what makes it pop and what makes it look best. So yeah, I hope you like this video, and if you paint along with me, I would love to see your end result. Thank you so much, obviously, once again, for being a patron. I love you, and I'm thrilled that you want to support me. It means the world. As usual, if you have any requests that you'd like to paint and you would like me to do a little tutorial, please please let me know. I would love to give it a go. Have a great day, everybody.